Alright, here we go with part 3 of our unit on ancient Greece. Today's focus will be on the two major city-states of ancient Greece, which were Athens and Sparta. Okay, so this should be short and sweet, and so let's jump right into it. The polis, or polis, was the Greek name for the Greek city-state, and it was the basic political unit of Greece. And when we say political unit, we're talking like about a city or a state or a county, something like that. The polis was designed to promote civic, which is government, and commercial, which is business, life. So this is kind of like the town center. The polis was kind of like the, like your typical city. Okay. Now, this kind of gives you an idea of how things were laid out. Your typical polis. Up here you had the Acropolis in the top right. That was the highest part of the city. You had the harbor and things like that. So that's kind of typically what your Greek city-states look like. Now the Acropolis, excuse me, was the upper part of the city where the temples and public buildings were located. The Acropolis sat atop the polis. So this is generally where your most important buildings were in the city-state. There's some cool pictures there. The agora was the open-air marketplace of a Greek polis, and it was usually below the Acropolis. And then the agora is kind of like your town center. Lots of markets, lots of trading, lots of small businesses, artisans, and things like that kind of selling things, people discussing political stuff, all that. All right, our first city-state was Athens. Now, Athens in Greece are the home to a very important concept in the United States, and that is democracy. Athens went through several stages in its government and eventually became the world's first democracy. There are 4 stages to Athenian government, and make sure you know all of these and in the order in which they occurred. The first was monarchy, and a monarchy is a rule by king or queen. So Greece was first ruled by kings. As people traded more and became wealthier, aristocrats emerged. Okay. So at one point in time, kings were the wealthiest, and then over time, things started to change, and other people became wealthy, and you had aristocrats, which takes us to stage 2, aristocracy. Aristocracy. Say that with me. Aristocracy. An aristocracy is a form of oligarchy, which is ruled by upper-class landowners. They took advantage of the majority of people who were poor. These poor people were forced into debt slavery and began to demand reforms. So your aristocracy is generally a small group of wealthy people who kind of take over government, generally, or most of the time, for their own personal wealth, personal gain, etc. So when the monarchy started to fail, they went to aristocracy. When the aristocracy started to become unpopular, they went to tyranny. Now, tyranny is ruled by someone who takes power, not necessarily bad, for bad reasons, and some of these guys were good rulers. Nowadays, when you hear the word tyrant, that has a negative meaning or a negative label attached to it. But originally, tyranny was a good thing. Somebody became popular, they rose up, they had the popular support of the people, and they took power. There were 2 key tyrants who made a name for themselves in ancient Greece. The first was Draco. He codified the first laws of Athens. So he took the laws and wrote them down, organized them into a understandable system. His laws were very harsh, but he did make some changes. If you ever heard the term draconian punishments, okay, his laws were very harsh and very severe. He didn't play around. Death penalty was common under Draco. whoops, that should say Solon, S-O-L-O-N, excuse me. Solon was an aristocrat and reformer. Solon canceled debts for the poor and ended debt slavery. He saw how debt slavery was ruining the Greek city-states, especially Athens. Too many people owed money or were debt slaves, and they could never get out of that because you were constantly, you weren't making any money. Okay, you were always giving it back to the person that you owed. So make sure you know these two guys, Draco and Solon. All right, we like to remember Solon as so long to debt slavery because he got rid of it. And that finally took us to when the tyrants kind of ran out of popularity. That took the Greeks of Athens to direct democracy. When people vote directly on laws, and the features are public debate, duties of citizens like being informed, voting. Remember, citizens were only males. And the U.S. has a representative democracy known as a republic. So when you vote on something like, let's say, in a classroom, that's direct democracy. If you tell somebody, if each class has a homeroom representative and they go vote on something for your class, that's representative democracy. All right. So make sure you know the order of those 4 stages. All right. So democracy was born in Greece. All right. Discussion, debate. And remember, but really the only people that could really partake in all of these new ideas of democracy were male landowners, for the most part. All right. Monarchy, when your king becomes corrupt, you change to become an aristocracy. When your nobles become corrupt, you turn to a tyrant. When they become corrupt, you turn to democracy, where people, power to the people. People make the changes they feel are necessary. All right. The next city-state was Sparta. Sparta is obviously become very popular through the 300 movies. Unfortunately, we don't really get too in detail. We will watch a short video on the Spartan way of life. But really all you have to know is a couple things. Sparta was kind of I don't want to say the opposite of Athens, okay, where Athens was about discussion, debate, democracy. Sparta was not really much. They were a lot more strict. They were a military city-state, more or less, okay, fierce fighters, all that stuff. Okay, here's a diagram of what some of the Spartan warriors looked like. All right, Spartan warriors, or Sparta, again, were very much into military strategy, becoming the perfect soldier, working together as a unit. Okay, and they developed something called the phalanx, which, again, you have long spears, and you can kind of keep reloading with the spears as as needed, as necessary, as the battle changes. Life in Sparta. Okay, again, Spartans weren't too keen on weakness. Okay, so if you were weak, either by just physically weak, or maybe mentally, or maybe even you had a condition or a disease, you were kind of weeded out and cast out of their city-state. Military training was pretty intense. Okay, lying, cheating, stealing, being physically fit, never giving up. They were pretty hardcore. All right. Most men stayed in the military until they were 60. You were trained pretty much from the age of 7 to 20, and at 20, that's kind of when you started your military service. So again, pretty hardcore stuff. Spartan women actually had more rights than most women in Greece, and that was also portrayed in the 300 movie. Again, in Athens, women didn't really have a say in government, but Spartan women were again expected to be strong, especially during the Persian War, when men went off to fight. They were expected to defend the home front. So Sparta, the patron god was Ares, which was the god of war. And it was a warrior society run by two kings in the aristocracy, or an oligarchy. All right, so they really didn't endorse or favor any type of public discussion or debate into how the government was run. It was kind of like, hey, a few of us are going to run things, and that's how it's going to be. So there was no democracy in Sparta. All right. So if you have any questions about Athens or Sparta, the stages of Athenian democracy, write them down in the margins. And please make sure you get your summary done, because again, that gives you the credit for having done these notes. So finish those up, and we'll see you next class.